Before we begin, we want to let you know that some sensitive content is discussed during this episode, including that of sexual abuse. So please make sure to take care of yourself while listening.
Good morning, buenas tardes, or good evening, depending what time you're tuning in today. My name is Ariel Jimenez, and I serve as a co-host for the youth portion of the Healing Generation podcast. Today, I'm here to highlight one of our earlier episodes. But before I do that, I wanted to take a moment and simply thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support. And thank you for always staying connected. We truly appreciate you and all of our listeners that continue to tune in. With that being said, I wanted to take a moment and highlight an episode we recorded back in 2021. 3 years ago, as we were coming out of the pandemic, we got an opportunity to sit with and hear from one of our comadres and sisters, Airam Coronado. Airam is a warrior, she is a mother, and she is definitely a healer. She comes to us from way of East Salinas and has a beautiful story that includes some traumas, some community advocacy, and definitely a lot of healing. As we sat with her, she reminded us a lot of different teachings that came through her experiences or through her teachers. The one that resonated with me the most is when she shared that we need to have courageous conversations with ourselves, and that if we plan to do this work, we need to be on our own healing journey, that we need to be honest with ourselves and lean on our community for support. So again, she shared her powerful story, and we wanted to make sure that we lifted her up. We hope that you enjoy this throwback, and we look forward to continue to connecting with you. Gracias, and we hope that you have a blessed rest of the day and a blessed rest of the week.
Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Welcome to the Healing Generation podcast. My name is Ariel Jimenez Bustos, and I'm one of the co-hosts for today's segment. Today's segment is centered on youth voice. It's important that as we continue to talk about healing, that we get an opportunity to discuss what does healing look like through a young person's perspective. I will mention that our maestros and maestras have taught us that if we truly want our community to heal, that we need to have the whole community at the table. For that reason, it's important that we take the time to listen to the journeys of our young leaders, that we acknowledge the lived experiences that they have, and that we learn about healing practices that work for them. For that reason as well, I have my co-host here, our young warrior, our young leader, Diego Sanchez Ramos, who will assist in guiding us through today's conversation and today's plática. So welcome, Diego. I'll pass over the palabra to you, and we could go ahead and get started.
Hello, my name is Diego Sanchez Ramos. I'm here today as Ariel's co-host once again. I want to thank you for having me on. As Ariel mentioned, we're going to continue talking about healing and discuss what that looks like for today's generations. But before we start, of course, this would not be possible without our listeners. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. As we continue talking about healing and how it is important that we don't heal alone on this long journey, we remember that we have maestros and maestras who walk with us today. With that being said, today we have Airam, who is based out of Salinas, and we want to welcome you to our podcast. Thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and start. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Airam Coronado. I am from East Salinas. A little bit about me. I'm 25 years old. I'm also a mother of a soon-to-be 3-year-old. His name's Aslan Coronado. I'm also a student at Hartnell College. The people that I'm representing right now is people that have been formerly incarcerated, youth that have been in the foster care system. I'm also representing, community violence survivors, sexual assault survivors. I'm also representing Indigenous women, and I'm most importantly representing my son, my community, and my family.
Thank you for mentioning all of the different roles that you carry. I think it's important that sometimes, we forget what are the different hats that we wear, not only within the community, but also with our family. So I definitely appreciate you mentioning that. Now, I know that you're also very connected in Salinas. You're very connected to the healing work that happens in Salinas. Would you talk a little bit about what does that work look like? What have you been involved with? And is there anything that you might want to highlight?
Yeah, so I'm currently the program leadership assistant at MIPA, and I do a lot of the programming, right? Whether that's holding space for other folks or community members. I'm also a facilitator in Shinashli, a facilitator in Sembrando la Milpa, and also facilitate women talking circles, monthly women talking circles. And that looks different, right? Each space that I enter is different. It all depends, the cargas that someone's carrying, also their gifts, their presence, their character. It involves all that. So, whether it's, you have to hold space for a mother that just lost her daughter in the hands of police. I'm like, okay, I take my medicinas. I can't say no. The little that I do know, in other words, I don't know anything about, I'm just a new person that's been introduced to healing. I was not raised this way. So I do a little bit of everything, whether that's, once again, doing programs or doing local advocacy. And for me, that's also part of my healing, right? Being able to speak upon systems that have been oppressing our people for years, for thousands of years, right? So being able to do that, that's also a healing journey for myself, and also for other youth that have lost, their family members due to incarceration, and are able to speak and being able to meet with elected officials and them speaking their truth, right? Whether that's me setting meetings with them, try to get them prepared for their public comments, or supporting them in any way, type of form that they need me to support them in, right? Also being mindful that not to re-traumatize our youth, not to re-traumatize our mujeres, right? I'm barely 25 years old, and whenever I do facilitate women's circles, there's women that are older, and I always ensure that either I have one of our maestras, which is Maestra Laura Castro, she's just a phone call away, or having another staff, one of my other colleagues, any of my sisters to support me when I'm in those spaces.
Right. So this work that you do around healing, it's always important to then ask, what does healing kind of mean for you? What does it look like for you and your community?
Well, what does healing mean to me? And just to even think about the word healing, right? People think that I'm just going to talk about my problems and I'm going to be fixed, right? And I'm already healed, right? I'm just going to go to ceremony one time and that's it. No, healing is a lifelong journey. Even if you work through a situation, you still might get triggered to that. Are you going to react like you used to react to it before? Or are you going to react to it like, hey, you know what? I've been working on the way that I'm feeling triggered right now, and I'm going to respond in a better manner that can be more approachable and more communicating, but yet be taking care of myself and my needs, right? Oftentimes, people go to ceremony. I was introduced to ceremony a few years ago, and I was more like, what is this? Like, this sounds cool, right? What is this? And I was like, oh, you don't know what it is. And I'm just like, I enter my first sweat lodge, and I'm like, what did I get myself into? I enter my first teepee ceremony, and I'm like, oh, Airam, what did you really get yourself into? I was raised my mom is a Christian, by all means, I respect everybody's beliefs, but it didn't feel right. And I was introduced to culture. I was introduced to tradition, right tradition, burning sage, medicinas, cedar, copal, by Colectiva de Mujeres, by one of my mentors, Shai Cota. She welcomed me to her space, to her women's collective space, and I was more along the lines of, what am I doing here around other women? I was raised mostly around men, and I kind of struggle having a good relationship with women. And later on, I will explain a little bit of why. But I feel like now that I've been working on myself and actually having a courageous conversation with myself, I was like, okay, what do you really need to work on, Airam? There's not time to play around, because if you're going to be holding space for other people, you really need to really be real with yourself, right? Really be truthful with yourself. That's where I am a little bit now. And healing is, once again, a lifelong journey. You're not going to get fixed in one sitting or just talking about your problems. You're going to have to keep wanting to heal. You're going to want to keep working on yourself, because you could work on everything else. You can focus on everything else, but if you don't focus on yourself, people are going to notice. And most importantly, you're going to start internalizing that, and it will show up in your health, and it will show up the way you show up to places.
That's perfect. And I think part of it too is when you're talking about how it shows up, and sometimes it shows up in the most inconvenient ways and in the spaces that you don't think is going to show up, right? When you're talking about, I know earlier you mentioned triggers, you mentioned it being a lifetime journey. And I think people don't understand that. We can't, when we're talking about intergenerational trauma, and generations of trauma that we carry, we're not going to get fixed in 1 hour, 2 hours, or even sometimes when we work with young men and young women, we think an 11-week character development session is going to, cure of all the traumas that we have for 7 generations. So I appreciate you mentioned that, because it's important for us to know that. And I've been in those spaces, right, where you're like in a sweat lodge, like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? What did my ancestors do for me to be in this space? So I definitely appreciate that perspective. Now, talking about the journey, you did mention triggers. And I think that's important, that even while you're on a healing journey, it is not going to be easy. It's not going to be all, romanticized. So can you talk a little bit about what are some of the traumas, what are some of the triggers that our young folks might experience while they start their healing journey, and even while they're a couple years into their healing journey? What are some of those traumas and triggers?
It all depends on some of the traumas that I've experienced, right? And I'm not going to share upon what other people have shared with me, right? I can speak only about myself, and understanding that my story is not unique. My story, it has happened to hundreds and billions of young women out there, including young men. And it still keeps going on. And some of the traumas that we face, right, is community violence. We have to understand, too, that we come from a society, we come from this culture where we witness a lot of community violence on a day-to-day basis, right? And we have to understand where community violence is rooted from. It's rooted through institutional racism, right? And we really want to look at the root causes of that. It's white supremacy. And we really want to look at how were the institutions built. Our institutions were built on slavery, over 500 years of genocide, of rape and killing over women and men and babies. Now, those institutions were built on those grounds, right? So when we're talking about how we're getting re-traumatized and generational trauma, we have to understand what's going on in our community and the institutions that have been set in place. That's how we're getting mostly triggered all the time. At a very young age, and I'm going to speak a little bit about myself once again. Once again, my story is not unique, right? Everybody experiences things differently. Some of the traumas that our youth are facing is, one is oppression, generational trauma, right? That's just a very broad term. But at an early age, I was, molested and raped from the ages of 4 years old to 10 years old. And it was an everyday thing till I decided to speak up. And when I decided to speak up, mind you, my mom was a working hard woman. She works in the fields to this day. And this was done by her ex-partner, right? Because after she found out, she was like, I'm done with you. He did end up doing time. But the way that the system framed it was they gave my mom and striking child protective services for child endangerment, which my mother didn't know. She was working full time. So the system does a damn of a good job of portraying single mothers and single parents as, where were you at when this was happening to your child? Well, I'm sorry. I was working full time to make sure that my kid had food on the table and clothes to wear. Now, moving forward with, I wasn't really dealing with the whole with my whole trauma, my susto, everything. I do come from a family that have been formerly incarcerated, that have been in prison, whether that's federal prison or state prison. My siblings were the ones impacted by the systems. And then moving on, it was more along the lines of witnessing a lot of community violence, witnessing domestic violence next door, witnessing drug abuse, witnessing all this stuff, right? That even though we're just watching, is still traumatizing us. At the age of 14, I witnessed the killing of my boyfriend at that time, right? They shot him and killed him in front of me. I was just entering high school. I was kicked out. I was pushed into the school to prison pipeline. My mom looked for services. There was no services, the lack of services. And that's another symptom that our community faces, the lack of services that we don't have, especially communities of color. While not having these services, I entered the juvenile justice system and the foster care system, because once again, it's so easy for them to label people of color like, oh, you're not doing a good job. We're going to be better parents and we're going to take your kid away, right? Because we are better parents than you. But by the time your kid turns 18, we're going to kick them out, right? We're going to do everything for them. We're not going to teach them the right tools on how for them to even open a bank account, how to ride a bus, or anything like that. By the age of 18, they're supposed to know this. So there's an assumption that the system just automatically makes, right? And the system has this great thing where everything's so punitive, right? So just understanding that. And I share my story. I've shared my story plenty of times, so it's easier for me to share it, right? It's harder for me to go into details about it. That's something that I will always try to avoid. But just speaking of my experiences, right? Those are just some of the traumas. And now that I'm 25, now that I am away from that, someone else took my place. Another youth took my place in juvenile hall, and that's how they do their counts. Another youth took my place in the foster care system. There's another little girl, another little boy right now on the east side that needs those services that are not being provided, you know? So understanding that even now that I'm a little bit more grown, there's someone else that took my place. And that's the most heartbreaking thing. And that's reality. And women of color get raped 10 times more at a higher rate than any other woman. Women of color go through these things at a higher rate than any other, right? And when we're talking about multi-generational trauma, what my great grandma went through, my grandma went through. What my grandma went through, my mom went through. And what my mom went through, I went through. And if we don't acknowledge these traumas, these generational traumas, then how are we going to work on them? Are we just going to slip it underneath the carpet and forget like that never happened to me, mija, you know? But when things crack down, they're like, yes, mija, that happened. How are we going to, you know? So I'm going to end right there. I could go on a good one.
No, you're good. And you know what I will say is for us to just take a moment and I know you mentioned that you've told your story plenty of times and that it's easy for you to share it, but I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge your strength. And also, you know, mention that is something that you should have never have gone through, that a lot of our women should have never had to gone through. You know, I was raised by a lot of strong women, and I still to this day will never be able to understand the amount of strength that they have, the amount of traumas that they unfortunately experienced, and also the realities that they've had to experience. And you know, fortunate for me, I've been able to learn some of those because of my younger sister, Citlali Jimenez, who is a strong warrior. I've been able to learn that from my mother, who has had those hard conversations of what happened to her when she was younger. You know, Adriana Bustos, who is a strong warrior within herself. And my grandma, Maria Perez, who said, you know, mijo, this is the reality. And this is also why you should never be this and why you should never be a perpetrator. So I just wanted to say, you know, thank you for your strength. I'm sure that your story will help a lot of people with their healing journey también, but I just wanted to say that I'm sorry that you ever had to go through that. So thank you for sharing. And, you know, before I pass it over to our young warrior, Diego, you shared a lot, and I appreciate that. And you shared also a lot of your mentors and maestras también that have been there for you. Is there one teaching, maybe one grounding that has helped you through navigating, whether it's your own experiences, whether it's the system that, you know, unfortunately relabels us, re-traumatizes us, and re-puts us through everything again? You know, is there maybe one teaching that you could offer to our listeners who might be resonating with your story? What is one grounding that you kind of connect with?
I don't think I could have one. But for now, I'm just going to try to stick to one. And that one is your body has its own power for it to heal itself.
You shared a lot. And I think you did a great job of illustrating, I think, a point that you made earlier, that healing is a lifelong thing. It's not just you do an 11-week program, you go to one círculo and you're healed, you're fixed. And I've seen this kind of come up, I think, once I started co-hosting the podcast. It's something that I feel came up again and again. And it's just the fact that sometimes people seem to look at healing as like you do it once and then you're healed and then you're good. Right. And I think you did a great job of showing that it is not just one time you're done. It is lifelong, because the traumas that our youth face, that you face, that everyone has to face, is just so it's so deep. It goes much farther than just us. And with healing being so fluid and something that we have to I like to say ride the wave of it, because it's not something, again, that happens once. It's something that we kind of have to slowly do over time. With COVID happening, how has that maybe affected your healing journey, the healing journey of the youth that you've seen?
Yeah, you know, with the youth that I've worked with and also women, oftentimes prior to COVID, we're like, oh, we're having a ceremony, you know, like, okay, I'm gonna go. You know, due to COVID, it's limited. There's hardly any, you know, sometimes there's very limited ones, right? And when we're talking about ceremony, we need our community, right? We need their support. We need their prayer. And that's definitely limited, you know? So it's like, don't worry. We learned other ways. Like, I'll pray for you. All of you will be here. I might not show up because due to COVID, but I'm praying for you, sister. And it's somewhat, we've lost some elders, due to COVID. And now, just hearing you, you could just see more of like their depression, right? You could just hear it in their voices when it comes to they're stuck at home and they can go out anyway. And sometimes they can't express the way they feel, even if we're running virtual círculos. And it's one different thing when people are typing what they're going through than actually hearing yourself of what you're actually going through. Right. And I guess that's a good practice of when we're talking about speak your truth because you're listening to yourself and you're actually like, that's what I'm really going through it, rather than you just thinking about it. Right. And I think that COVID has definitely affected the type of engagement that you do have with these people. Oftentimes I get a call sometimes late, like, I'm actually going through this. Okay. Mind you, I am a mandated reporter. You do have to limit to what you're saying, but if you need me to hold space for you, I will. I'll burn some cedar over here on my end, So it has definitely affected people. They're dealing with either people that have caused them trauma and being stuck with them 24/7 in their own home. Even speaking on other traumas that women are going through. Some women are living with their abusers, and their getaway was going to their job. Their getaway was going grocery shopping, and now they have to stay at home.
And so let me have a follow-up question in terms of COVID, right? Because I think there's one thing that you mentioned that resonated with me was that one of my young men said, well, attending Hope Noble, well, I can't talk about the issues at home because I'm still at home right now, right? And they're connecting through Zoom. And I remember even some of the best work with some of the young men didn't happen in circle. It happened on that drive home when I had to take them back home, or it happened on the setup because they decided to show up maybe 10 minutes early to help set up that altar. And in that setting up the chair, setting up the room, they'll disclose some of the deepest things that they're facing, but then won't discuss that maybe in circle, right? So that connectivity and those opportunities for them to be able to express what they're going through and really start that healing process for themselves is missing right now because of COVID. Is there a way that you can share with the audience? How do you stay connected with the people in your community in a safe way where you're still following county restrictions, but that connection emotionally, mentally, spiritually is still there, even though you might not be able to be there for them physically?
Yeah. So one way I do connect with them is either I'll give them a call. Hey, I haven't seen you in group. How are you doing? Is there something that you would like me to do? Do I need to send you a gift card to, for something? Do you want me to, having those open, having that communication, constant communication with them. I've worked with youth that have been in a foster care system, which I wholeheartedly love and have like this strong strength, connection with them because I know how it feels living in a group home. Now I can't even imagine due to COVID what they're going through, in a home full of other youth that are going through their own traumas as well. One thing that I do acknowledge is sometimes I send them gifts. I drop off sage or cedar bundles to their homes. I'm like, hey, here, do you want to pick them up? Do you want to meet me somewhere? Do you want me to drop them off? Most of the times, can you drop them off? Yeah, it's fine. And also having that communication with their parents. I always like, hey, let me meet your mom, and then I introduce myself to las señoras, to the señores, because this work is personal and it's personal to a lot of us, right? I think that's why we invest so much time and we go out of our ways and we don't even see it as getting out of our ways. We see it as like, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here to support you until you tell me, you know what? Respect my boundaries. Okay. There's always that line of boundaries that you just can't cross. So it's understanding where they're at, boundaries, and what can I do to best support you? Oftentimes we go out about our days and they never ask us, they don't ever ask you for permission, and they never ask you, hey, how's your day going? And those two questions can definitely go a long way, right? Hey, can I get your permission to share your picture on social media? Hey, can I get your permission and go drop off some sage at your house, right? I guess that's the only way, the constant communication with them. Because they have to somewhat remember that there's always going to be someone there. Not always someone there, but there's someone there at that time that can best support them.
So when working with the youth, I think, Ariel, you have someone like me, and I'm sure you have other youth in your community, right? The youth kind of look up to you guys, right? You guys are doing the work. And I want to ask you, Airam, who is a maestro or a maestra that you think really influenced you in your healing journey? Now, I know you've talked about a couple, right, in your previous answers, but like is there one that if you had to pick up just one, who would that one be?
Not to play favorites or nothing, but just one.
I can't do that. I don't think I can do that because I have two. Can I just mention two? Okay, I'll stick with two. And I do apologize. I love everybody dearly, but the one that I know they're a phone call away is Maestra Laura Castro. I know that at any time I need support. I need her to come facilitate. There's something personal going on. Like, hey, this is going on. Like, she has just a smooth voice and she's so down to earth and she will meet you halfway and she will give you the best advice she can give you while still listening to you and still ensuring that you're following her advice, but she has just that gentle, tough touch, that she's like, okay, I'm going to speak the truth. And this is what I'm hearing, So she's just a phone call away. So she mainly supports me in the women's circles. Like, I need you, And then I call him more of my Theo, Theo Smiley. He is definitely a phone call away. And the quote that I shared earlier, he actually shared that with me when I was going through a tough time. When I was dealing with a lot of health issues. He told me, your body's strong enough to heal itself. So those are my two main one. Those are the two that I'm choosing right now. Theo Smiley and Maestra Laura Castro.
I do not envy you for that question at all. I don't think I would have been able to pick one or just two. I know I would have felt a little bit of guilt. So, but thank you for sharing, both of those warriors with us. Going back, I think it's always good. We talk about generational work and we talk about the generational blessings that we have. You mentioned earlier that you're also a mother, right? And I think we're in the month of May. To us, May is important. May 10th is always Mexican Mother's Day. I grew up in a house, my grandpa had 15 kids and all 15 were women. And my mom was the oldest out of the 15. So I grew up, month of May was just celebrations left and right. What does it mean to be a mom? And then also, can you share a little bit about your connection with your little one? I know you said Aslan Coronado. How has that journey of being a mom helped you?
Wow. Well, the journey of being a mom, let me tell you, society does a great job at painting a great picture of how moms are going to be, right? So, in the beginning of my pregnancy, I struggled, right? I was dealing with homelessness. My mom lives in Arizona. My dad was never in the picture. So I was dealing, even though I do have a big family, I was dealing with a lot of things, right? So, my pregnancy I don't think I not valued it. I guess I didn't really enjoy it as much as I should have enjoyed my pregnancy. I was really going through a hard time, trying to figure things out. And I had my little crime buddy, when he was born. Usually I would go through things alone. Through all my life, I dealt with things on my own. And now it's like, I have someone that's next to me. Someone that I just need his laughter. He was such a happy baby. Now he's 2 years old and he just has this, oh, child, listen, But it's just like now, it's like, okay, you want to go for a hike? And he has so much energy. It's like, okay, let's go for a hike. I have this broken toe, so I can't go on a hike. I was like, go run outside. And he's just running, I guess a lot of things that I grew a big detachment from my mom entering at a very early age, at the age of 6. I grew a detachment from my mom. She was a good mom, but just things that were going on. And the foster care system definitely reinsured and embedded that detachment, So having a little one, I was just like, I'm working on it. I love you, but I'm really working on to reconnect with myself and being able to feel that attachment to you. And he was a newborn and I was just like, but I love you. This is weird. This is a weird feeling. Like I feel detached from you, but I'll give my life up for you and I love you. But what's going on here? And it grows in you, right? I can say that motherhood is just seeing, and I'm just going to describe it the way I see my 2-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old. He has just his bravery, his curiosity, his innocence, his willingness, that which is unfortunately side, that willingness to do whatever he feels like doing, whenever he feels like doing it, And it's just, man, oftentimes I hear a lot people tell him, other moms like, oh, enjoy it right now that he's little. You don't want him growing up. I was like, yes, I do want him. I want to see him grown up. I want to see his character. I want to see him. I'm curious to know how my child is going to expose me. You know, there's always a little kids that are just like, well, my mommy does this, you know, like I'm curious to know what is he going to say about me?
The truth tellers.
Like I want to hear his little voice. Yeah. I want to hear his voice. I want to see how he's going to engage with other people. His father's and also, you know, very engaged with Aslan. You know, we co-parent very well. You know, he was locked up through my whole pregnancy and he got out when Aslan was a year old. And after that, we decided, you know what, we're better off as co-parents. You go your way, I go my way. And we have a good relationship. And we also have a good relationship with Aslan. Mm-hmm. You know, I guess we were just better off as friends. And that's okay. Because I know that Aslan has two supportive parents, you know, and to all those mothers out there who are dying to see their child grow or just want their child to stay little, it's okay. You know, whatever works. I do want to acknowledge all those mothers and all those parents that are working full time, you know, that are working. I can say that we see you, we acknowledge you, and we thank you for everything that you do, everything that you will continue doing for your little one. You know, I think a lot of times because I'm doing this work, I'm doing it because of my little one, because I don't want him to enter the system. And oftentimes I see this a lot. I see a lot of people like, oh, well, who cares about that issue? But once it happens to their kids, now they're really involved, right? And it's just like, dude, we don't have to wait for it to happen to our child, to our children, to our grandchildren. We can do it now. We can start advocating. We can start speaking our truth now. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And motherhood is a beautiful struggle, you know. And a lot of, I want to pray for all kinds of patience. I need patience. I'm working on it. Right now he's with his dad. If he would have been here, he would be facilitating this whole meeting himself, you know. But just I wanted to share that much about my little one.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I always do think it's quite funny. One of my favorite things is reading like young school teachers talk about how like their kids, like their students will talk about what their parents say at home. And it's always interesting how they will repeat everything that they hear at home and the parents don't even know. But as Aslan grows and as those young kids will grow, they're going to be part of the next generation of us. And I would want to ask you, what advice would you want to leave for that next generation?
Man, I have a lot to say, you know, that there's no such thing as giving up. That even if you feel you have the whole world's weight on your shoulder, and even if you feel like that nightmare is never going to end, it's going to end. Going through my own traumas, I never thought it was going to end, and it did. And that's the best feeling, that you just feel liberated, you know, from everything. And no one's going to scream as loud as you are for yourself. No one's going to take care of yourself as much as you are. So if you need to scream louder, do it. If you need to ask for help, do it. You know, no one else is going to guess how you're feeling. No one else is going to guess how much you really need to scream or advocate for yourself. You need to advocate for yourself because nobody's going to do it at the same level as you are. Always follow as much discipline as you can. Listen to your elders and follow protocol. You know what I mean by protocol? Any house you go to, they have their own rules. And you need to respect those rules and respect people's boundaries. Understand what no means and here not to respond, but here to comprehend and to really listen and to really think about like, wow. And most importantly, sit with yourself. Sit with yourself and really do inventory with yourself. Because as much as we're doing this healing work, trust me, it hit me face hard. Oh, I'm really going to do inventory now. Because if you don't work on it, things will start internalizing. And things internalized, let me tell you, will start showing up in your health. And that's the scariest thing ever. You know, once again, there's no such thing as giving up. You can't give up. And I was a very vengeful youth. And I would always say the last step has to be mine, right? Well, guess what? You know, it's not about you proving anybody wrong. You need to prove yourself right, most importantly. That's where your energy should be going to. Proving yourself right and knowing, you know what? I knew I could do this. I've done it and I'm going to keep doing more. And learning never ends. It's a lifelong process as well.
I do just want to take a moment and just, you know, commend you for all that you've shared today. I think even, you know, when you're talking about the next generation and really giving all that advice. I know it comes with a lot of wisdom. I know it comes with a lot of healing. I know it comes with a lot of scars. Like, it comes with all of it. So I do want to just say thank you for that. There's a lot, even within those couple of sentences that you shared, for us to unpack, and we could probably spend a whole week on it. So I just want to thank you for that. As we close up, before I pass it over to Diego, is there any closing remarks? I know you've mentioned a lot of different things, whether it's been your maestras, maestros, the lessons that you learned, some of the experiences that you've had, and even some of the work that you're doing. But as we close up, is there anything that you want to close up with?
Yes. So let me share this other part of my story. I think when I talk about health and I talk about, when I talk about internalized, when we talk about generational trauma, and we think that we're working on it, but we're really not being truthful to ourselves, it's going to show. And it showed to me in a women tend to carry everything in the reproductive organs, right? And there was a point like 9 months ago, where I had this super heavy bleeding, and then there was other things going on as well. And I had one of my Tia Teresa, right? She told me, like, mija, we could look at it from a Western perspective, or we could look at it from an indigenous perspective. And the Western perspective is going to tell you, we're going to go in there, we're going to kill these cells, we're going to attack these cells, and we're going to put hollow stuff in your body, radiation and all this stuff. Or you could look at it from an indigenous perspective, and you're going to be like, you know what? It's a teacher's and maestro knocking in my door, and I'm going to let it in. But I'm not going to let it in for it to stay. I'm going to embrace it, work on it for it to go. So she told me, it's like, what are you dealing with right now that you haven't really pointed it out? I was like, well, the relationship I have with my mother. And then other stuff, right, that affects me now with the relationships I have with other women, which I can say that working on it, I'm still working on it. It's, and I put it this way. Men in my life hurt me, but they protected me. Women in my life hurt me, but they didn't protect me. She's like, no. The women in your life hurt you, but they just didn't know how to protect you. And that's one thing that oftentimes we have that concept of, like, well, they didn't protect me. No, they didn't know how to protect you, but they still stood by your side, And so that's one teaching that I got from her. That goes a long way. And after that, everything has regulated now. How my health is going way better now. Really, because it will manifest into something, and it's a super scariest thing. So if I could tell you right now, if you have to sit with yourself and be as real as you want other people to be with you, but you're not being real with yourself, and actually sit down with yourself and have that inventory, I'm like, I really went through that, and this is how much it hurts me, and I have not addressed this, and I have not addressed that. You need to address them now, and that's where a lot of my Theo Smiley comes in the picture, where he holds ceremony for me. After that, everything was like, wow, prayer. If we don't have ceremony right now, it's okay. Go roll your smoke, tobacco, your corn husk. Go roll it and go to the ocean if you live close to the ocean, and sit down and pray. Roll that smoke with that water. Roll that smoke with that fire. Because you need that balance in your life, and that's a balance I needed. And I guess my prayers are going well now. I don't know. I will find out my health thing in September. But I'm okay with whatever's coming my way. I accept it, and I'm okay. But definitely, it's something that it's better now than later.
Well, I will say that I'm happy you're doing better health-wise. I think that's important. We do tend to suffer in silence, and I'm sure it was hard to ask for help. I'm also channeling my maestra, Tia Susi Armijo and Maestro Jerry Teo, who always remind us that our body keeps the score. That if you're not ready to deal with it, your body will remind you to deal with it. And if you're not ready to slow down, your body will definitely slow you down. And it can come up in many ways. Some of the traumas that we're not dealing with, when we don't sit with ourselves and we don't listen to ourselves, it could change our digestive system. It could change the way that we feel on a day-to-day basis, and it could really impact and compromise our health. So I thank you for that too, because it's a reminder, not only for us listening, but for everybody that we come in contact with. So thank you for that. And I definitely do want to explore more of the teachings that you have and more of the maestras and the maestros that you carry with you, because I believe that we carry, them with us in every space that we come into. So thank you for that. Diego, is there any closing remarks that you have for our listeners or even for Airam?
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming on, right? It was a pleasure having you. I want to say thank you for not only sharing your story and your wisdom, but also sharing your traumas. Cause I know that can be really hard, especially with this kind of medium of a podcast, right? You're really putting it out there. And so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on and kind of speaking yourself on this podcast. Once again, I want to thank all of our listeners because this truly would not be possible without you. You guys are the best audience and I love you. And again, for our listeners, just remember that healing is a lifelong journey, right? It's been said now. It's probably going to get said again. So just remember to take inventory and help yourself heal and love those around you. And I think if that's what you take away from this, I think we did our job.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.